What up, guys? Joachim here, Justin Morgan, and this is an example of a text that I'm learning right now. In Greek, it's Dialogos tria στο γυμναστήριο, so dialogue number 3 at the gym. And this was actually generated by ChatGPT. I use ChatGPT to kind of advise on my workouts. So when I'm going to the gym, I'll create a plan or a schedule of like what lifts I'm going to do on certain days and things like that. And I'll tell it, these are the, sorry, my cat just freaked out and took off for no apparent reason. So I'll tell ChatGPT, these are the lifts I want to do. This is the day that I want to do it in. Please organize this and, do whatever. And it organizes it. For language learning, I'll say, this is my plan. These are the goals, the things that I'm going to do. Please generate in this case, I asked it to generate a dialogue between two people and just on things that I'm interested in. So the first two were about language learning and travel. I'm going to be going to vacation in Puerto Rico in a few months, so the Spanish ones usually revolve around my trip to Puerto Rico and speaking to people in cafes and things like that. These in Greek are a little bit different because I don't have any plans right now to travel to Greece anytime soon. So, but it just, in whatever language I'm learning, it generates these. And so what I want to talk about, though, today is how I use these. So I spend about 2 days learning these, and I set my timer for 15 minutes. So if I open my thing here, you can see I have a 15-minute timer set, and I spend 15 minutes exactly on these, and then, or I set the timer for 15 minutes anyways, and then I just learn to say these. These are, I think, let's see how long it is. So this one is 1 minute and 51 seconds. Was that the full time? Yeah, 1 minute and 51 seconds. So that's how long this runs. So I learn about almost 2 minutes of dialogue between two people. And, it's level dependent. So I spent a few years studying Greek, and I went to Greece, and I was, doing well with having basic conversations with people, asking people for directions, ordering things at the airport and at the local like shops and things in Greek without having them revert to English because they're like, this guy doesn't speak Greek well enough. I'd rather just speak to him in English. And then, once you got out into like rural parts of Greece, they just didn't speak another language. They're Greek-speaking people, so they only spoke Greek. But, then after taking a couple years off, though, like I had a lot of regression because my Greek wasn't like native level Greek to begin with. So after a couple years off, it's like I was back at not zero, but I was, back to not really speaking that well. And it took me a while to redevelop those skills once they had regressed a bit. So I've been doing these dialogues as a way to kind of acclimate myself to the Greek language from having taken some time off. And this is one of the methods that I use in order to improve that skill. So day one, I will actually spend the first 15 minutes going through, even before I begin, I will go through the sentences and make sure I understand what the words mean. So I'll look up any words that I don't know. And most of the sentences, you should make level appropriate so that you do know what you're doing. So, phenese polis sovaros is this sentence here. And I wasn't sure of the meaning of the word phenese, but I pretty much, I could guess what it meant from the context, but it's phenese polis sovaros otan proponise. You seem, like phenese, you seem, polis sovaros otan proponise. And I will go through each one of these multiple times, saying them over and over and over again. And so, phenese polis sovaros otan proponise. Phenese polis sovaros otan proponise. And wait a second. And I'll do it as part of the whole context. So that's the number one speaker is phenese polis sovaros otan proponise. And then the response from Justin, which is me, is ne. Προσπαθώ να συγκεντρώνομαι, οι προπονήσεις μου είναι αρκετά έντονες αλλά σχετικά σύντομες. So I had to look up the words intones and sintomes because I didn't know those. But I proponisismo ine arcata intones, it's intense. Training is intense. A la sketica sintomes, but fairly short. So the training is intense but fairly short. So then I will do this whole thing together. Phenese polisoboro sotan proponise. And then speaker number 2. Ne prospathon asinkentronome I proponisismo in ne arcataentones alasketica sintomes. So you can hear like that's fairly smooth, maybe not like native speaker smooth, but this is my first day. I've done day 1 working on this text, and you can see I go all the way down. It's 2 minutes of dialogue between two people, or 1 minute and 51 seconds of dialogue between two people at the gym. And I will learn to say that, and I try to say it with the recording. So this is the shadowing portion. So this is, I heard about this initially from Dr. Argeas. I'm trying to think of his first name, Dr. Alexander Argeas, probably 10 years ago, and I didn't jump on it, and I wish I had, because it probably would have made my language skills a lot better by practicing this more often. But other people have used similar methods. Moses McCormick was really popular for learning conversations like this. I don't know if he did shadowing exactly, but I know he did a lot of Pimsleur and things like that, and he learned to do these short dialogues, short conversations between two people, and that's something that inspired me at one point, and sadly, same. I was exposed to that. I thought this is a really good idea, but I didn't jump on it right away. And if I had, my language skills would probably be a lot better. But honestly, back in those days, there was no easy way to produce those materials. I could have come up with them using Google Translate or something, or just looking up things. But now with AI and the ability to have things like ChatGPT or Gemini or the other Claude to generate text like that, make it really easy to produce materials that are appropriate to your level and things like that. So language learning has become a much more accessible skill to develop. Whereas I used to just take text and I would actually make my own little interlinear books that I would read, and I would use Google Translate and things like that. But so Google Translate, even when I began learning languages a decade ago, was not actually all that accessible because it was often inaccurate and didn't produce good lookups for things. It would do better. That's not important. Anyway, so I'm not going to get caught up on that, but I'll show you a little bit about how I do this. So by the end of my first day, I try to do one pass through while I am shadowing the speaker. And this app that I'm using here. This is a whole separate app. It's called 11 Labs. And it's a great company. I used the 11 Reader, or I'm sorry, this is not 11 Labs, but it's 11 Reader. I used 11 Labs to make a full audiobook of a book that was written by ChatGPT at a B2 level. Of course, I prompted it and had it do, I did a lot of the initial work on what I wanted the book to be about and kind of ideas for things, but ChatGPT is the one who actually produced it at a B1 to B2 level Greek. So that was, I couldn't have done that on my own. Even if I had to write something in English, which is my native language, that was at a B1 to B2 level, I couldn't have accurately guessed what words, what sentences, and what dialogue would be appropriate to that. So that's something that, AI is really good for. But so by the time I get to my first 15-minute session on day 1, where I actually am doing this, I try to do one pass through with the dialogue with the reader. And so that's where the 11 Reader comes in, is that it produces these. I just copy and paste the text into 11 Reader, and it produces something that I can read along with. I don't know if I can hear it real well with the recording on, because I don't know if you guys have ever tried this, but when you try to record something and you speak you have like the microphone set so that you can hear what I'm saying on the recording. If you try to play something, it's really low, but I'm going to try to read along with this. This is my goal by the end of the first day, is I try to read along with the text one time. And then when I move on to the second day, I work on this a lot more. So the first day is all about comprehension, about reading through these, about smoothing out the language and practicing the sentences over and over again until I can say them. And then the second day is a lot more shadowing. So by the end of the first day, first 15-minute session, I only try to go through this once. Tomorrow, when I do this again, it's going to be largely this. It's going to be largely shadowing and speeding up my ability to speak with this, because by the end of the first day, I'm not really that confident in being able to speak with the text, but it's good to try to attempt it once. So you'll see how I do and where I'm at on this after 15 minutes of practice. So, and I cannot hear that at all, actually. I actually cannot hear that at all. The recording doesn't even come through even at a soft speech. So you guys may have heard it. I don't know if it came through on the recording, but I'm just going to say some of it to demonstrate how I would do it if it were reading along. But it's to gymnastirio. Ja, su Justin. Telios idi tin proponisisu. Ochie coma. Molis teliosita squats ke thorax ecorazo me ligo. Φαίνεσαι πολύ σοβαρός όταν προπονείσαι. Ναι, προσπαθώ να συγκεντρώνομαι. Οι προπονήσεις μου είναι αρκετά έντονες, αλλά σχετικά σύντομες. All right, so I'll practice that off recording and go through the whole thing. I'm not going to try to have you guys sit and listen to that, but it's just an example of improving your language skills. I will, after the second day of practice, I will take the vocabulary that's brand new to me that I don't know, like stuff that I pointed out before. I mentioned that when it says archetaintones, I'll probably take that. So it's going to be, that means like fairly intense. Archetaintones, a las sketike syntomes. So I'll take sketika syntomes, which is but fairly brief or fairly brief. And I will make that an Anki card. So I've hated Anki in the past, and I think I've thought it was a terrible way to learn vocabulary, and I still think that, but it's a great way to review vocabulary that you've learned. So I'm learning these texts, and I'm learning the vocabulary from them, and I pretty much remember the vocabulary okay after that second session. And then I take that and put that into Anki, and it's not so tedious and laborious to learn after you've already learned it. So sometimes when it comes up in Anki this way, I'll review it and I'll be like, oh, that sucks. I don't remember this word. And so I kind of relearn it, but that's not so bad then, like if I were to learn it all anew. And you can see if I go to Anki Web, I have some Greek words and Greek dialogues. Greek is currently my focus. When I'm learning Spanish, I also do this same practice. So I'll have 15 minutes dedicated to a Spanish text. But Spanish is not my focus right now. So pretty much for Spanish, I only do learning these dialogues. I don't break down the words that I don't know, but I will go back and review the whole dialogue, and I do that for Greek as well. So I take the individual words and I take the whole dialogue. So once I finish learning this, I will take the phrase diálogos trias to gymnastirio and put it into Anki, and when that comes up, it's not in Anki. The dialogue isn't. The dialogue's in 11 Reader, so I'll just come over to 11 Reader and go to my library, which you can see at the bottom here, library, and I have these collections, and some of these are books, some of these are dialogues, but I have a section for Greek monologues, or Greek, it's really Greek dialogues. I started out that way, and I will click on Diálogos Trias to Gymnastirio, and it will be there for me to review, and I will shadow it then that for my review. And once I've shadowed it, I go to Anki and check off and say I've completed it. So I'm using Anki to review vocabulary that I've learned from these texts, and I'm also using Anki to review the shadowing and speaking by going over and shadowing with the text in 11 Reader. So I'm using several different apps there all together to do language learning. Those aren't the only things that I do. In spite of having a fairly long explanation of these, this is only 15 minutes of language learning per day for this particular practice of doing the initial dialogue. Now, the Anki reviews, that's a separate activity, but that also takes less than 15 minutes. So if you're only studying one language, doing the dialogues and doing the reviews in Anki is going to take you about 30 minutes per day. So that's pretty brief. If you're wanting to learn a language, that's a pretty good way to learn, and you're actually learning to speak and to listen and to comprehend. So you're learning a lot of things by doing this one practice, and it really does lead to a lot of growth in your skills. Aside from this, I also do other practices, which I've shown you guys many times in the past. For my first couple thousand words in the language that made doing practices like this easier, I used Closemaster, which is another language app, and I thought that was really good. I think eventually you need to move on to dialogues, and really I think you could start out with dialogues, but I think Closemaster kind of makes it something that's already prepackaged and it's just there to help. I don't know. Eventually, I stopped using Closemaster once I got each of these languages on to higher levels. And then, it just makes it easier. I also do a lot of interlinear reading where I have the language that I'm learning, like Greek or Spanish, a text in a book or in a dialogue or whatever it is, and then underneath that is the English sentence, so it's interlinear. There's a Spanish with the English translation directly underneath it, and then as I read along in Spanish, if there's parts that I don't understand or I'm not following, I can look down at the English as a reference to get either the word translation or the sentence, like how is this parsing out, and look back up at the Spanish or Greek, and then it makes it comprehensible. So I'm like, oh, I get it now, because I have the English as a reference there, and I just keep reading. I keep reading. So that's more extensive reading, whereas this would be intensive. I'm learning brief text. So I think that mix of intensive reading and extensive reading is necessary and will help you learn. I also do listening to shows. I watch television. I listen to dialogues on YouTube. So I know there's a lot of people who drive certain factors of language, like all you need is comprehensible input, or all you need is this. Well, I'm not any of those things. I think all of those things are necessary. And if you're not doing all of those things, then there are gaps and things that you're leaving unchecked that could make your whole life a lot easier at least in terms of language learning. So not your whole life, but your whole language learning experience a lot easier by doing those things. So you guys take it easy, and let me know if you have any questions or any input in the comment section below, and I'll talk to you soon.